Thank you all, and good morning. Let's talk through some of these findings.
Is there a reason why people are on the other side? There's lots of empty spaces.
Because I think because it's a long way to walk
I can't see them.
over there. So yeah.
I guess there's a screen.
All right. So let's start with the first finding. How optimistic are all of you? Do you feel that this slide accurately captures your own confidence when you're thinking about the next 12 months? Asma, if I can start with you, please.
It's like in line of sight.
Exactly.
Thanks so much for having me here, and to everybody for coming. It's really a bit surreal to sit in person somewhere and see real people in a big group in a room, so it's quite lovely. I think for myself, very confident in what? I'm confident in where I am in the work that I'm doing, personally, because I think that there's a lot of interesting projects and things like that are happening at Diageo in particular. Confident in what's going to happen next. I'm cautious, so that would be my answer.
Okay, yeah, it's a good point. I think confident in what? Arnab.
I think you alluded to a fact which will come towards the end, but I am confident in the last 3 years that the team we have built has the skills now, both to do things virtually as well as now in person. The only thing, how confident are you about the next 12 months? I'm a little concerned and cautious because I won't be there with them. So
Breaking news.
That does have, as their team lead, I do worry about that because I have been building that team together, and whoever comes will have the challenge of dealing with that for the next 12 months, and these are times of change. So yes, there's a lot that can happen, but I am confident in their skills and who they have become over the last 2 to 3 years, which I think will help them deliver on whatever that is out there.
Okay. Linda, are you also optimistic when you're thinking about the year ahead?
I would say, like Asma, cautiously optimistic too. I think when we were doing this survey, I definitely participated. It was better times, and then now we're looking at what everyone is talking about. Last 3 years was about COVID, but now it's about profitability. So the pressure is on. I think as comms practitioners, heads of departments, agency partners, I think the number one thing to think about is really profitability. And I mean, leading a comms team for a startup is early days as well, right? But I think from my point of view, it's proving the worth, proving the value. As you think through what the next 6 to 12 months, right? See, I'm not even thinking too long term sometimes, right? Because it's short-term gains. Investors are looking at, shareholders are looking at. So I think there is a chance and opportunity for us to kind of define what the mid to longer term plan could look like. So yeah, cautiously optimistic.
Ilan, you are obviously talking to a lot of clients all the time. Do you see an optimistic client base, or are they perhaps concerned about some of the threats and issues that have risen, perhaps even just in the last couple of months?
Actually, on the consumer side, I'm very concerned. When you talk about profitability, it means more targeted and a lot of time cut the cost. So on consumer communications, I'm worried actually. On the corporate side, I'm very optimistic because with what's happening in the past 2 years, as well as what is happening now, corporate communication, crisis management, reputation management, are showing its power to the senior management. As long as the team members and communication professionals can really pick it up and step up, I think we will demonstrate more values.
It's interesting because if we start to look at the next finding and we talk about the value of the comms function. To your point, Ilan, what we I think have probably all have seen is those qualities, corporate comms, corporate reputation, issues management, employee engagement, have really been the primary drivers, I think, in terms of demonstrating the value of communication, of public relations over the past couple of years. Linda, how do you see the function performing in terms of boardroom value, and do you think it's in a position to capitalize on the gains it's made from the past couple of years?
Yeah, I think reputation is the game now. I don't know about you, but marketing budgets have suffered big time. That's just what it is in times of a looming recession. So I think comms is the way where you will continue to invest in a foundation, because there's no more important days to do so during rainy days, right? To really just focus on the foundations. And I mean, going back to my world now, which I've joined a startup. Prior to that, I was in a bigger tech firm. But yeah, it's really going to basics. I was just sharing with the panelists, I think it's going back to the vision, mission, understanding what is the culture and values, how do you help the team to scale, how do you help the team to grow. So I think these are very fundamental things that founders, leaders do care about a lot, amidst, I guess, the profitability conversation, right? You know, I think these are the things that will help the organization to stay ahead, stay resilient, and I think we should pitch that. That's just what I think should happen.
Arnab, do you see it as a sustainable long-term change for the value of the comms function?
There are multiple layers of change happening across. It's not just comms. It's how we do business, how we interact with people. Everything is changing, and the pandemic has given rise to new norms. And there is, obviously, when you have new norms, you have an ability to set the agenda and reset some of the old ways. So I see there is continued value in driving those benefits, but at the same time, there is opportunities to change some of the ways we have been doing things, be it, for example, I read this somewhere on someone's LinkedIn feed, Neil Cross, if I'm not mistaken, he had a slide at the back which said, metaverse or make it worse. And we are all looking at different new ways of communications. Are we all skilling up for that future? So being complacent is not going to get us to where we are now. We do need to invest in our own skills, and we do need to move forward with thought. And as everyone in this panel is saying, be cautiously optimistic, but at the same time prepare for these new challenges ahead, which we typically, and I can say this with conviction, that most of us in this room, how many of you use Twitter quite aggressively, use LinkedIn quite aggressively, use social media quite aggressively, yet you ask your CEOs to do the same. I know a handful of people in this room who do that, and you have to be the change if you are going to be able to tell your bosses, your CEOs, that this is what needs to happen. So there is that need.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Asma, we did a session, I don't know if you remember this, it was, I think, April 2020, we did an APAC-D session on what lay in store for the corporate comms function. And now 2.5 years later, would you say that the elevation in value is something that will persist beyond, and if not, why not?
I would like to say yes.
Mm-hmm.
You know, with my own vested interest, but I actually do believe that the past couple of years has really helped bring forth the value of communications to the boardroom, but also to so many other functions that maybe didn't quite see us or understand the value that we could do beyond, you know, a very superficial understanding of, oh yes, press releases or interviews or things like that. What we haven't kind of touched on here yet is employee communications, internal comms, and how over the past 2 years that's really galvanized an area of work that perhaps sometimes before was seen as not as crucial as external comms. And that, I think, is one of the areas that will continue to be valued now, because I think a lot of organizations are realizing you have to take care of your people, because your people are the ones that are going to make sure that you achieve, the success that you need in terms of performance. And yes, those numbers that you need to hit and the profitability, et cetera. It's about the people. And if you don't take care of that, that's going to be problematic, especially, I think, we'll jump to it a little bit later, but the whole idea of people moving jobs, the motivations that people have are slightly different now. I think over the past, 2 years or so, people have kind of recalibrated how they think. So I think comms has a different multi-layered role now within an organization. And where you lean more depends on the culture of the organization. But it's something which everybody's trying to better understand, so we have a place. And then I think a challenge that we have, other than, I totally agree with Arnab, just making sure relevant, is as we do this internal comms, to also remain externally focused with the kind of skill sets that you need to make sure that you can be, as a professional, relevant and impactful for the organization that you work with and for yourself, right? To make sure you continue to be whatever it is, to be able to achieve what kind of comms ambitions you might have, or even find new comms ambitions. So that's what I think.
I just have one other thing to say, as she was saying it. We talk about authenticity, we talk about trust a lot in comms. And one of the things that internal communications that has been second cousin to external communications for a very, very long time is important, and something that I always champion wherever I was, is that your true cheerleaders, you can say I am the best, but if your own employees are not saying that, you're beating a hollow drum. And that needs to change, and that needs to be what's driving you to drive internal comms as much as external comms. I'm not saying give one over the other, but find that balance which was missing earlier.
Sure. And I mean, just I think that the answers we've had so far just really reflect the multi-stakeholder nature of corporate communication, rather than just focusing purely on external stakeholders. Ilan, do you agree with the comments made so far? Do you think that from what you've seen, is the value of comms risen in the boardroom? Are there issues preventing that?
As an external agency, that we've been briefed more and more, really, more significant job to do, including educating the CEOs, tell them what PR can really do when they don't listen to their in-house team. It's kind of interesting to me, but to me, the most important factor, whether we can continue to deliver value, is whether you can put yourself in your boss's shoes. When your CEO, what is his pain point? A lot of time, I think the communication team, especially the middle team or the junior team, focus on what they can do, rather than what their boss' concern is. If you look at the boss today, the CEOs are worried about losing their staff. Staff does not want to come back to job, so internal communication become critical. They're concerned about how they stand on the global issues that will reflect their positionings. So corporate positioning and reputation become critical, right? So it's very important to put yourself into his shoes to understand what his priority is, rather than sending him a briefing book, which like a book thick, that nobody, even I, don't have time to read through it. So to me, that's the first thing. I hate the crisis manual like this. I hate it. We take like hours and hours, getting very expensive to put things together like that. Who really reads it? I mean, the in-house team might have to read it in order to pay the agency. But my question is, which boss would ever read it? So that's my first thing. Put yourself in your CEO's shoes, understand what he really wanted. The second thing, as an agency, I found it very important for us to be an educator. we think the boss and our clients knows everything. They don't. So a lot of time we need to be patient and use the words they understand to tell them what we can do and how we can help you to solve your problem and how to measure that. I just did a client training the other day. We talked about the value communication could bring, and the client just laughed. He said, every value you talk about cannot be measured. He said, I talked to my all BD hats saying that, what is my KPI, right? Give me a figure. Then we talk about the PR value. It's exactly happened like 2 weeks ago, right? And the CEO sit in front of me and Asia head saying that all you mentioned cannot be valued. I think we need to find some way that we would be able to present ourselves and to benchmark ourselves with other departments in order to get a bigger budget. Mm-hmm. The reason is, if you cannot be measured, you do not have money. I will throw you a little bit money to test. I'm happy with the little result. But if you cannot demonstrate how you gonna return all this money, why should I give you huge investment? So that's the second thing. I think we need to be patient, we need to be educated and understand how to sell ourselves, especially as an agency. So I always tell my client, tell me your KPI. Give me your KPI. I'm going to make you look good. Okay, so don't tell me just do media relation and send press release. Tell me what you want to achieve and what your boss is concerned of. Let's work together to see whether we can do something wow him. And the third thing is we need to be flexible. We are very familiar with all the jargons and the terms. In our company, in our agency, we separate corporate and consumer so clearly that I think it's just last year I realized it really doesn't fly with a lot of clients, especially Chinese clients. They start with marketing, they go for sales, and in China today it's very easy for communication on consumer side. It's all about traffic, conversion, and sales, and everything can be tracked through digital method. Okay, so there was a time I tried very hard to have a data department or to equip our team with data and found it's impossible. You don't like, I mean, artists cannot get a Nobel Prize for mathematics, right? It's just impossible. So later we found there's other way to do that. Client has their data department, so we just figure out what are the data we need. So they send it to us and share to us. It's very important to keep transparency between us. And then we figure out the client not only need consumer, but they also need corporate, they need brand, they need crisis management, but they don't understand it, okay? They don't understand they need corporate communications. They put it all, they wrap it all together with consumer. So today in China, we have a very interesting function called branding. It's actually a bundle service to Chinese customers with both consumer and corporate. So it doesn't matter how you call it. The client has its own way and they have its own KPI. So we just follow and call it branding, but literally it's consumer corporate. At the beginning, it was very tough for our corporate team to understand consumer, traffic, conversion, sales. It was not in their domain, okay. But then we began to move some consumer team into that branding team. So they merged, and today work very well. So I mean, we have to be flexible. Our client has their needs, and they are also growing their needs. Sometimes I think we need to understand. If we can do all these, we can be change makers. If we are change makers, we can bring value to the boardroom. Otherwise, if we only send press release and focus on what we used to do and what we are good at, we are limiting ourselves. But communication, I mean, we are unlimited.
There's quite a lot there, but I think the kind of interesting points, and it chimes with the research, is when we talk about value, you know, it can't be divorced from how that value is measured. You mentioned spending. Obviously, we have the findings on what organizations spend on comms, what they expect to spend, I wouldn't say there's a huge increase recorded, but let's go to the ROI slide, because I guess this is the one of the important ones in terms of how value is being demonstrated. I don't know who to go to first with this. Arnab, maybe I'll go to you. Does it concern you that media clippings and sentiment metrics are still top? And does this present a challenge for long-term value?
Absolutely. It's like the Indian software industry back in the days when we were just back office operators. You need to move up the value chain to really be considered. We talk about being in the boardroom, but what are you talking? Are you talking business metrics? Are you talking outcomes? Are you talking outputs? That is essentially the difference between you can scream at the top of the building that you want a seat at the table, but what are you doing to prove it? There's that saying, ease is the greatest threat to success than hardship. It does require a little bit of hardship to change the perceptions of what is easy to do versus what you need to do. And it's an age of transformation across everything that we are doing. In every bank, in every industry, we are going through transformation. So this is the time to reset those age-old ideas about how we measure. Because if you look at it, even in terms of media, how many are you going to track? And does everything have the same impact for you? So beyond that, setting that aside, the whole workplace is changing, the values are changing, and therefore your approach to communications need to change. What are you doing in terms of the other bits, which is the share price? We are currently in Standard Chartered looking at all of these metrics to try and see how best we can create a new system of measurement. I don't think we have it cracked yet, but we are looking at it, and we all need to. While we look at these other areas, there is also a need to instead of once a year, pulse reviews and surveys are more in the need now than ever, where you can't just take a survey at the end of the year for things you've been doing throughout the year. It's no longer valid because things are changing so fast. So all of those combined, I think there's definitely a need to change the way we approach to communications. And I always feel it's like our own journeys in our careers, right? It was messy. You tried to figure out what was right for you, and then you kind of find your own path. And it's kind of like that with measurement as well, right? You need to find, and not every company is going to have the exact same ways of measuring success, but you do need to find something that brings value to the CEOs, and most importantly, what Ilan said, which is how do I make sure my business leader understands the value I bring to the table beyond just vanity numbers.
Asma, why do you think we're still having this conversation in 2022? And is it something that you've been able to address at Diageo?
The answer to the second part is no. I think we try like everybody else, and I do wonder, as you were saying, there's this perception of the inexact science of trying to measure the things that we're able to accomplish in moving, say, change, in particular. For us, it's a bit of a mixed bag. I've had this conversation with the agency we have, with all my colleagues in the region, globally as well. Our teams do it slightly differently, but it's a mix of all the things that we see there. One key element that we, and it's how do I say this? It's tricky. It's just tricky. We all know that. One thing that we try to do is maybe segment it a little bit. Like, okay, the way that I measure my external could be slightly different with my internal. Internal, you have a bit more insight into specific metrics, and you have things like, you know, the pulse surveys and the employee surveys that are being run regularly, that you can we do go back to those quite a lot now, because then you've got this core data metric that you can see change. And if you do something, you're kind of attributing the change to that, or if there's a gap, that's where you're seeing it. It's not easy, and I think it'll be something that we will struggle with all the time. And I would love if someone's kind of cracked it, to share, please. Share with the rest of us, because I think it's an ongoing, and it's interesting too, because we're dealing with our stakeholders are not all people who understand communications, and they have different understandings of communication. And if you're fortunate, you can have a conversation with someone who's willing to kind of figure it out with you. And if you're, less fortunate, then it's a bit of a fight. Mainly because they want it a certain way, and you may not be able to deliver the metrics to truly reflect what's going on with what they want you to do. I'll give you an example, not with this job, but a colleague was saying in another industry said, they use things like share of voice, and the article or the interview was in so and so, and the challenge back from their stakeholder was, okay, you tell me that this appeared in X media, and there's this number of, this is the circulation per se. So is every single person reading this? How many people are actually reading this? And they're like, okay, take a step back. It's not necessarily possible. Like if it's online, media companies don't necessarily share that with you in an article way unless you're an advertiser, is one. The second is that's not even the point here, right? When you're doing it for communications. And she had to kind of, she came to me and said, how do we respond to that? How do you respond to that when someone has that view? And then, we talked about nuance, and, and Financial Times is different from another media per se, and this is who you're trying to reach, and it's tough.
Linda, a persistent challenge for the value of the function?
Yeah, I think everyone has said a lot, but I think I'll share an anecdote. So when I joined my startup, we are a LinkedIn for doctors. I came from LinkedIn. So I asked my CEO, so tell me, why did you hire me, and what do you want me to do, right? Same question. Put yourself in the shoes of my boss. So he said, okay, I think your impact. If a doctor can recommend another fellow doctor into the network, the job is done. So I had to process that a little bit, I think it's not about the referral, right? I think it's about going to your audience directly. In comm school many decades ago, you learn comms is one-to-many, right? I don't know if that has changed. I think it has to be very targeted now. So maybe it's one to the few people that you want to talk to. And it doesn't have to impact the whole world, So circulation, I don't know, so it doesn't matter, right? So, but I agree, again, going back to basics, is also to create that awareness, that general awareness, not just for your own target audience, but also going back to where you want to impact the most. So I think that question helped me a lot, because I actually put it down in my original pitch. Agencies ask me, what is the ROI do you want? I say, okay, let me share with you what my CEO wants. My CEO wants a referral from a doctor to another doctor, a client to another client. So that's just the gist of it. Of course, there's many other metrics that I shared, from there, right? But I think essentially what you want to create is that trust with the leadership that you have. But more importantly, also to think about how comms has evolved over time, because to my CEO, the rest is waste. Right? Should I get an engineer interested in the brand Docquity? Not really, So it is just a very, very clear audience that you are targeting.
I think just a quick last thing. I think one thing that helps us also is sometimes being able to link to, maybe if it's not the share price, the business objectives.
Yes.
It really is linking back to the business objectives. How can you make that loop back and see how you're able to impact that in any way. That's already, I think, a good starting point.
But it's interesting in that from the 3 clients on here, I've kind of got 3 different answers in terms of what value looks like to each of you in your own.
That's what I said.
In your own
It will
personal
change for
context.
every individual, every company, every thought process in that. 'Cause culture plays a whole lot of
And at the start,
element.
maybe every quarter.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
And every quarter. So bearing that in mind, Ilan, I mean, this idea of a standardized benchmark of some sort of a silver bullet, is it just unrealistic?
And from the agency perspective, a lot of, first, I fully agree. Every company has its own objective and own KPI. And even a company at different stages has its different KPIs. For instance, a startup, survive, right? Then make a profit and get money. And they have different stages. At different stages, they have different priorities, and your communication has to catch up with the objective. But second, there are, from the agency perspective, for instance, when we are in the luxury market, we know there are a bunch of clients at almost the same life cycle. Okay, for instance, Chanel and Cartier, right? They're almost at the same life cycle. They might have new products coming on, but they are almost at the same level, same life cycle. Certain index, certain factors can be benchmarked. And it's very important for benchmarking, because otherwise, how do you know where you are in the market? You say, I'm doing very good. Then, for instance, Cartier saying, I'm doing very good. And your CEO asks, how about Harry Winston? You say, we are in different life cycle. We cannot be benchmarked. That's not an answer. So from my perspective, it can be benchmarked, but selectively. And as an agency, I will always try to benchmark, and I always try to benchmark their investment versus their outcome to say whether their approach or communication is effective. And that can also give us a lot of clues in what we can do better.
Okay. We will take questions from the floor, by the way, in not too long, so please hold on to any thoughts you might have. Let's talk about staffing. Asma, will you ever not be understaffed in the in-house comms function?
Not from where I sit. We have very lean teams. Yes, so I think no, I don't think we're not understaffed at the moment.
Okay. So maybe I guess the next question to that, Arnab, is why are functions still understaffed? I think it seems to happen more often in this part of the world when we compare it with, let's say, North America and Europe. Is there a way to get to a point where functions are more effectively staffed in this region? I suppose, does it also come back to the value that they're demonstrating?
Yeah, I think it's, we were just having a quick discussion just before we got on stage and this particular point, and I think one of the things Asma said, is it really the number of people or the value you bring?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is kind of where we are stuck with. I have grown my team over the pandemic years from 1 to 7. Mm-hmm. But that's not because they're all doing the same thing, because they have different levels of focus and different value that they bring to the table. And to find that and demonstrate that through what we do is what will get you whether that is the right staffing or not. Mm-hmm. And as everybody is looking at the next 12 months, you need to continuously build on that value. It's not like what you provided last year is what you are providing this year and what you will provide for the next 12 months. It's about how you grow that value, just like you grow a business. So it's about that more than headcounts. I think we all in agencies, I come from agency, so I can say that when you're on the agency side, you're always looking at the money, not the skills that you bring. Mm-hmm. You always sell yourself as, I have all that you need. What do you need? not this is the value I bring, which is unique to me. Even.
Which agency you used to work with?
I have worked in a couple. I have worked in Ogilvy, I've worked in Edelman, and I've worked in V. Mm-hmm. So I have worked across very different dynamics in terms of strategy and approach to clients as well. So it is across all of them. And if you look at associates, senior account managers, they will all sell themselves as to the highest bidder. But is that the right thing to do? Is a question we need to ask ourselves.
Just to jump in a little bit, Arnab, and yes, you reminded me of our conversation as we were coming up. Yes, it's the point of, do you have the right people doing the work that you're doing? And is the work that you're doing the right work, actually, that should be focused on for the organization, for what it wants to achieve as a business? So then it becomes kind of our jobs to better inform our stakeholders if it's not the right thing. When I say understaffed, I mean, internally our teams are lean, but we work a lot with agencies and consultancies, and they're by extension a team. And it's interesting that you bring that point where, the value I see it as a partnership of an extension of my team, but at the end of the day, the person who sits inside and has to deal with all the stakeholders is still one person. And then it becomes kind of we have these conversations a lot, I think, throughout anyway. Like, do you do 10 things, fairly well, or do you do amazingly 3 things that are going to give you higher value? And it's sort of then that time taken to manage the internal stakeholders to bring them to those 3 if they don't quite see it.
Linda, from the startup perspective, is it more about the value that you're bringing, or is it about bodies?
Yeah, my biggest thing is don't throw bodies at the problems,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
That's not very thoughtful. But I'm pleased to announce this week I have 2 people joining me. So that's my breaking news. Like, God. Yeah, so I've been waiting for a long time. Anyway, so I brought in an internal comms and social media person, on my team. And to me, that's critical. And an external comms person coming on board too. So 3 people. So yes, I was very understaffed because it was just me. But it was great because I then can work with the founders, everybody hands-on, right? And really build the foundations from scratch. But I think now that the team has come in, it's important to Asma's point, what are our priorities, right? I mean, we can do 20 things, of course, and at a startup, 20 things means 40 things, right? So my question to the team is always, what is it that will make us really valuable to the business, right? That's the age-old question. But at the same time, what are the training and learning that you need to help you do your job well and help us get to the priorities well? I think that's the piece that I wanted to address a little bit later on the learning and development front, especially when we talk about skills.
Sure, okay. Ilan, from your perspective, do you think that in-house functions are effectively staffed?
A difficult situation to answer this question as an agency person.
Never enough. Never enough.
I think it's all about priority, seriously, and what's the business objective, how you measure your success, and how you prioritize your job. So I see very lean client. They totally get it. So they have a small team, but they do very, very well. For instance, when we work with Shanghai Disney Resort, they don't have a huge team. We work with them for like 6, 7, 8 years. We started work with Shanghai Disney Resort, surprisingly, 5 years before they launch. And the relationship continues until now. I think they know exactly what they want to do. For crisis management, corporate reputation, they do very well by themselves. They capture the core media relations, and they understand that government reporting has to conduct it by themselves rather than ask us to do. But when you need to outreach to mass consumer media as well as different sector media, they come to us. They said, you know the KOLs, you know the community, and you can do a better job. So to me, that's a very smart approach because they don't need a huge team. They need a good in-house team. And of course, headcount is never sufficient, but, but they managed to do a great job.
Before I come to the floor, let me just ask about this one. Asma, let me come to you if you don't mind. Do you feel this is an accurate depiction in terms of the work that you're doing? And does it concern you that media relations is top ahead of, we are often told that it's now more holistic, it's multi-stakeholder, but the old favorites are still at the top of the list.
Well, I guess it depends what sort of organizations they are too. I think that varies quite a lot in terms of the volume maybe or the type of media relations that we do. Like, I find that's not the biggest driver of everything that I've been doing per se, or some of the things that we're doing. It's important for sure, but I'm fortunate where we are that the stakeholders are represented slightly differently. So I see employee engagement here is like number 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5.
Yeah, 5.
I think at Diageo it would be sort of on par. It'd be much higher, like almost on par with corporate relations or something like that, because it's seen as core, and it's increasingly something that we understand. Again, the success of you being able to perform depends on the people that you have with you, because they're actually going to be doing it. And that seems to be a recognized and valued area of work.
Linda, you're effectively building a function from scratch. Does this kind of map against what you're looking for, or is it a little different?
The top few are there. The first thing I hired was internal comms. We're 300 plus now, Series C closed. So it's time to scale, right? Investors are looking at us to bring that impact. So it's important to help the team to galvanize what they are really doing, because everyone was probably doing their own thing previously. So that to me is the number one thing. And then moving forward, of course, because we're a digital business, so the digital strategy and the social media work has to be a priority, because that's how we will engage our communities. And of course, the usual corporate stuff, reputation, crisis issues were not that big yet, so thankfully, touch wood, nothing's happening in that front. So these are the 3 things I would say. But going forward, to your question, if I have the luxury of time and money, I want to build like a social impact team, which to me speaks to our vision and mission, because we are in the business of helping doctors build healthier lives with their patients. We're a doctors first platform. To me, that is mission critical, that we also engages what our doctors care about, which is saving lives. So to me, that is a very, very critical part of the path that we will take, hopefully in a couple of years' time, to really build that. So I'm seeing brand activism, and I'm surprised, I guess, the social impact piece hasn't really...
Or like sustainable communications,
Yeah.
that's what we have quite a bit of an issue.
Diageo is
We do a
ahead
lot
of the
of that.
curve.
Yeah.
I don't think that was actually...
So that will
perhaps
be the
under
4
other.
things.
Arnab, does this correspond? You've built a team over the last couple of years. Does
I will say that being in information cybersecurity, number 3 is top. But I think it dovetails with employee engagement. It's also about public affairs, because it's related to policies and programs. So those would be probably more. I barely touch on media relations because we can't talk about most of the things that we do. But we do talk about it with relevant regulators, industry bodies, and things like that, where cybersecurity is something that you typically require understanding across the industry to be able to stop it. And it's improving at it's just exploding as we do more digital stuff across all points. But if I look at the comms function as such, I think there needs to be a complete, like, that digital strategy needs to get probably more attention. And when I say digital strategy, I don't mean do we have a presence in the metaverse or make it worse, as Neil would say, or are we looking at how this all fits in with the broader business outcomes? And how do we not bolt it on and really make it intrinsic to how we operate? It requires work. And I don't think everybody has cracked it. And I'm happy to listen to anyone who thinks they have cracked it. And it's something that will be relevant to everybody in every industry. I think that's where the focus needs to be, but I'm not sure everybody's focus is there yet. And social impact.
Yeah, okay. Let's see if we have around 10 minutes or so left, maybe slightly less. If we see if we have any questions from the floor. We have one there. Do we have a microphone around anywhere?
Of course.
Maybe shout. Yeah.
Thank you, guys. Thanks. That's been a very enlightening conversation for this morning. My name is Prerna. I'm the Vice President for Comms for Sony Music in Asia. And hi, Arun. My question is relating to employee engagement and employee comms that you guys touched upon a fair bit. And I think the challenge that most of us are facing is how do we make it engaging? We all know we get those emails, we get the newsletters, we get the links. How many of us actually go out there, read it, and how many of us actually engaged, quote unquote, through that? So I'd be keen to understand any kind of strategies that you've been conceptualizing or any kind of ideas really on how we can change and pivot on that particular aspect. Thank you.
Who wants that?
I can take that first. I'm actually in the middle of we just re-galvanized our internal communications for the region. And one of the key factors that, just from doing a little bit of a survey of all our colleagues and an understanding of, yes, engagement is a key challenge, was that our leaders had to show up in it. If you only have the various leaders coming in for that one email or a couple of times, it's almost as if they can't just dial it in. They've got to actually be vested in it. There's different organizations have different places where you can engage. We use Yammer, so that's kind of the internal platform. And what we realized is if the leader shows up, then everyone else feels like, oh gosh, I posted this. And it's, it's being seen by XYZ, this MD or this person, not just my boss, who probably asked me to post it, but other people from across different places are seeing this. It adds the feeling of this is a community that's kind of happening, is one. And so we've actually have a very prescriptive guidance and ask of all our execs, but this had to come from the very top. So our president for the region basically said, we're all in this. Asmar, you lead, everybody else follow, because this is what we need to happen to have that kind of engagement. So there's I have a roster, everybody once a week, and I will come for you with their comms leads, and we work on it. And it's a habit that everybody's sort of getting into it. And then just look at it. Don't just post and then never show up for the next 4 months, but also come into it every week and have a look and say something about other people. And the other thing with an organization that's very big, what we also realize is it's not just about employee engagement in your patch. Like, my neighborhood that I take care of is Asia Pacific, all our markets, but globally as well. This platform is where people find out about something that's happening in other parts of the business. If they don't know anyone that they would ask directly. So if we don't actually put it there, it's like it didn't happen. So we have it there, and I emphasize it's for the record. If you have it there, 2 years down the line, someone's looking for something similar, they can find it. And this is a way for us to kind of keep getting visibility for the work that's being done.
Love that. I have a different way. And as in many ways, I came from this great company called LinkedIn, so I'll share a little bit of that. A lot of things are from ground up, so quite different, right?
Yep.
We focus, I mean, they used to focus a lot on the culture and values, once again. And it's important, right? Also, your employees are not just their day job people. They have other passions outside of their work. There are employee resource groups that you can work with, partner with HR. Think about what matters. You know, there is like women's group, there's parenting group, there is, I don't know, fitness group. So at Docquity, I'm pleased to see that actually they already have these things before I joined. So the founders has already set the direction. So leadership involvement is super important, and being the executive sponsor too. But at the same time, I think it really touches the employees' heart and soul, because they realize that what they care about, the company cares about too. We put in time, put in resources to help them be a better professional at work. You know, whether it's helping them with some of the personal challenges, or even just going down to, you know, hanging out together. Because my company, a lot of Gen Z, a lot of young people, they want to hang out. They want to feel like, you know, COVID is over. I want to be part of a community within my workplace that is like-minded. I think that is super important for a lot of employees these days. And I mean, I'm not Gen Z, but I also want to be part of a broader community, and I'm still searching for that, you know, after 5 months. And I want to feel belong to a certain organization, right? So that I can talk to my colleague and say, hey, you know, I'm having a really bad day at work. So I think it's really the ground up pieces that I think really put the, I guess, the X factor to employee engagement, because it shows that you care about the people that works for you beyond just their day job, because that will go on anyways. And I guess the other thing is finding champions in each of those markets to really lead, set by example, and advocate. Because I think employee also needs to know that a culture and value is not just something that, you know, something on the writings of the wall, or is it one page on a PowerPoint, but really something that they can see and feel in each of their offices. Because your leaders will not be able to go to all the markets all the time anyways. So you should cultivate that kind of second layer to really help it. And they should come from all functions.
Yeah.
They should be representative of all diversity, and not be just your leaders, you know, because, you know.
I mean, sorry, I meant that as that was something that we're sort of trying to propagate, but at the same time, you do have to have that multi-layered
Correct.
champions for sure, but also just physical things that you're doing. It's not all online.
Yeah.
So offices, right? We're trying to get people to come in and talk to each other.
Yeah.
So making that attractive.
I think we've got time for one more question. Keith? Is the mic coming? Yeah.
So this is a bit of an existential question, so maybe a bit early in the morning, so sorry. I suppose the question really is, what are the panel's thoughts on where the communications function fits? You know, is it a function even? You could go that far. There's a lot of, we're sometimes hampered by our strengths, and there's also our weaknesses. There's a lot of value that we can bring into organization. And outside of sort of the traditional media relations and internal comms, which are measurable, and or at least we do measure, part of the, just what are our thoughts? If you come from an agency point of view, for example, I think what I'm seeing in the marketplace and what should be probably happening if you're on the agency side is how do you work with the comms team, but also how do you work around the comms team to a degree, and the growth of advisory companies, you know, and that's where the gap is. There's a lot of value internally that you can bring, and there's a lot of value that agencies can bring. So what are our thoughts on the future of communications function? Big C, small c, how does it matrix across the organization? Over to you guys.
That's an easy question. Who wants that one?
Super simple answer. As simple that question is. Strategy needs words. Revolutions don't start without words. So communications is an important function. If we stop believing, then that's it. Everybody stops believing. So the first step is believing in the fact that you matter and your work matters. So that's the first thing. That's about self-worth. But that's the existential part of that answer. But I think nothing is a binary game, as we have realized in the last 2 years. Agencies are as important as in-house teams because the functions that we perform are very, very different. And if we are not able to distinguish that, that's when you're not able to deliver that value that we spoke about earlier. Having clear view on what the agency, for example, again, going back to metaverse and make it worse, can be something that the agency brings to you because they are piloting with someone who's much more courageous than you are, possibly, and you can learn from their mistakes. So there is an opportunity to bring in the agency, get that experience and their learnings, and then deliver something that delivers on that ROI as well, and therefore gets you the trust and credibility of your business leaders by doing something that is industry leading or whatever. But to be able to do that, you yourself need to be in a position to be risk aware and not risk averse. Most of us in-house become risk averse. So you don't want to do anything that requires any amount of risk. And that's me talking in a banking perspective, which is a highly regulated industry. But I can tell you that it is equally likely for any other industry. So it's about how much of that risk you're willing to take and is good for you and your function, that you will be able to drive that value up to the board levels.
Thanks. Ilan, do you have a quick final comment, perhaps?
I work with a lot of clients. Sometimes the marketing team eat the communication team, sometimes vice versa. It all depends on the person leading that department rather than the function itself. The best example recently is Mercedes-Benz China. Right now, their communication team had become the head of communication and marketing. Well, the budget suddenly skyrocketed, right? Because she took all the functions. Simply because she's a daring and keep learning lady with a lot of professionalism, and she's the best client I have. She understands how to get values from PR agency. Well, we are very clear that she's the expert of auto marketing, and so that our team serves with their guidance on how to work on the auto market. But Mercedes-Benz goes beyond auto. It's luxury, and it's lifestyle. It requires corporate positioning and reputation management, which areas that we have a lot of expertise and knowledge and case studies from different industries. That's how we collaborate and we work very well.
Thank you. What a great conversation to get us going this morning. I'm really sorry I've got to bring it to a close because I feel like we could have kept on talking for a while. But can you please join me in thanking our wonderful panel, Asma, Arnab, Ilan, and Linda. Thank you all very much.